Hi everyone, I hope you guys are enjoying your summer. I wanted to share a short idea that I came across in the Chuvot Sridi Eish, Chelik Aleph, Siman Yud. As many of you know, and for those of you who aren't yet in Migdal, I'll let you know now that for the past year I've been giving a shir on understanding tefillah. And the methodology that I've been using, which is the methodology of the Avudraham, the Riben Yakar, and many of the modern academics as well, which is to attempt to understand tefillah through the lens of the psukim that Chazal built the language of the brachot on. So there's a phrase in Modim where we thank God, Chalu Rachamecha, that your mercy has not run out. Chalu Rachamecha v'lo tamul chasadecha, your mercy hasn't run out, your kindness has not ceased. And the Shrida Yesh was asked about this phrase and what it means. So he notes that the source text for this phraseology is the third parak of Eicha, where we say, Chazdei Adonai kilo tamnu, kilo chalu rachamav. But he asked theologically, what does it mean that God's mercy is unceasing, unending? And he suggests the following based on the Chovot HaLevavot. He says there's two types of mercy. There's what he calls Rachmanut Haba'a Mitoch Chulsha. Mercy, which is essentially an expression of, or at least a function of, a certain type of weakness. Namely, She'eno Yachol Lirot B'tzar Acher. While it may be coming from a good place, sometimes compassion is manifest less as an expression of concern for the other, but because one cares about himself, because he can no longer handle seeing the pain of another. Now, obviously, under normal circumstances, that is a good thing, though that type of sympathy, or perhaps more precisely, empathy, has its limits. So, for example, and this is an example from a provocative book against empathy by Paul Bloom, a psychologist at Yale, I believe, where he says there are limits to empathy. Because if you make all of your decisions based on feeling the pain of others, so then, for example, a parent may not want to give his child or her child a vaccine. Because when you bring a child for a shot, the child screams and cries, and the parent feeling the pain, if they give in to their feelings of pain, so they would actually be doing the wrong thing for the child. And therefore, well, obviously in many circumstances, what the Srida Eish calls Rachmanut, which comes from Chulsha, is a good thing. It's good if I've sensitized myself to the point where I can't stand to see someone else's pain, and therefore I'm motivated to act. If I'm motivated fully by that type of Rachmanut, it has limitations. And sometimes it'll drive me to do things that are in fact not correct. So that's one type of kindness. One type of mercy. Now I would add that as well has its limitations, because if at some point I become desensitized to that pain, either, God forbid, I actively develop callousness, or more likely, I see so much suffering that eventually I become desensitized. If my Rachmanut only came from this sense of I can't stand to watch other people in pain, so if I manage to desensitize myself, then I would no longer be motivated in the same way, at least, to express that kindness. So that's Rachmanut type 1. Rachmanut type 2 is what he calls Rachmanut Haba Mitok Tshuka Amuka Leitiv Legalgel Midat Tuvo Lechirim. Compassion or mercy that comes from a fundamental desire to be good to others. And without getting into the anthropomorphic issues, where we understand that God's emotions are not anything like what we understand in human terms. Either, if you follow the Rambam, he doesn't have human emotions, or other Rishonim, he has emotions, but they are wholly different than human emotions. God's Rachmanut, therefore, is different. It comes from a positive place, a place of strength, that in his nature, whatever that means, it is to express goodness and compassion in a positive sense. Not because he's lacking, not because he needs it to obviate a feeling of pain, but because his very essence is to express Rachmanut. That type of compassion, mercy, is endless by definition, because it is essential. It is part of God's essence, so to speak. Again, 1,000 times so to speak, without getting into the theological issues there. But therefore, because it doesn't run the risk of the person becoming desensitized, and therefore no longer having the motivation to be merciful, but rather it comes from one's very identity, or in this case, God's very identity, so then it is endless. And that's what the Sri H says is the pshat in the pasuk and in the tefillah, that we thank God for his kindness, which comes from a place of his very definition, and therefore is endless, because it's not simply the expression of God's passing feeling, but it is definitional to the way God interacts with the world. And he adds that there seem to be halachic / hashkafic implications of this. And he notes that in Shemot, Perek Chav Bet, Pasuk Chavav, we have limitations on the duration of time that one can take a security from a poor person. And the Torah says that you should return the clothing when the poor person needs it. If it's night clothing at night, day clothing during the day. Because it's his clothing. What else is he going to sleep with? And if he cries, I will listen. Ki chanunani. And he says, Lo nimtzaud pasuk hazeh b'chol haTorah. There's no other pasuk like this that rationalizes the mitzvah and says, Shakadosh Baruch Hu kivyachol kilu mitchanein lifnei hamalveh. It's as if God is begging the lender and telling him, he's trying to persuade him and soften his heart. As if to apologize. He says, what you see in this mitzvah is it's not a mitzvah of justice. It's a mitzvah where God demands kindness, which is not really just, meaning if I lend someone money, I have the right to hold on to a security in such a way that will inconvenience him, because that will make it more likely that he'll pay back the loan. But God says, I know this is not something that justice would demand. But God says, maybe you'll cry to me and say it's unfair, because it's your security. You're right, but too bad. If it's between you, the wealthy lender, complaining that you don't have security, and the poor person crying out that he doesn't have clothing, I'll listen to him, because va'atam ki chanunani. I listen to him because my very essence is one of compassion and mercy. And I would just add that for those of you who are in America, this is your parsha this week. For us in Israel, this was last week. It's for this reason that those qualities, Rachum and Chanun, which are part of the Yid Gimel Midor Rachamim, that Moshe invokes not only after the Egel, but also after the Meraglim, that it makes sense that Moshe invokes those to get mercy for the Jewish people when they really don't deserve it. Because what God is saying is that it's His very essence to be good, and therefore sometimes, even if it is against justice, since that is the way God has chosen to define His relationship with humanity, it can sometimes override the demands of strict justice. And that is the Sridei Eish's suggestion for how we should understand the phrase every day in our tefillah of Chalu Rachamecha v'lo tamu chasadecha.